This Business Unity South Africa's President Bonang Mohale joins us to just unpack it a bit more. Mr. Mohale, good morning and thank you very much for your time. You know, as BUSA, you're among those sounding the alarm now that the conditions that perhaps gave rise to the insurrection still exist and are in fact worse. Talk to us about this.
Mfunda, thank you so much for having me. When one looks at the highest crime rate countries in the world, we now rate number 3 with about 77 murders a day, every day. After Venezuela, Papua New Guinea, we are only followed by countries like Afghanistan, Honduras, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and El Salvador. But Mfundo, for me, I think lawlessness is just one of the numerous and serious maladies that are afflicting this country, where inequality is widening, racism is at an all-time high, and black graduates are roaming the streets hopelessly. Public education has collapsed, and public health care continue to fail the poor and the vulnerable. Crucial infrastructure is laying barren, and lawlessness has genuinely become an epidemic. Mfundo?
So it seems from what you're saying that we've entered an era of great discontent. But what do we attribute it to? Is it poor governance, an absence of governance? What is it?
I think all of us must look back on 28 of democracy and admit that we have not succeeded in eradicating the legacy of apartheid. We are not blaming apartheid in 28 years when we are free, but its legacy is still with us. Let's look at government, labor, business, but also civil society. And I'll start with labor because at the moment, we are feeling its effects much more profoundly than any other of the 4 social partners. ESCOM is classified as a national key point. It is classified as an essential service. Yet the National Union of Mine Workers and NUMSA embark on an illegal strike. There is no action, no consequences. They get rewarded with a 7% salary increase. Zero consequence.
But where do we place the blame? Because that on its own seemed to be the great debate, where it was said that perhaps too much emphasis is placed on these workers being essential without also perhaps the blame being shifted to the employer to say you've also got to recognize that these are essential workers. So when you go to the negotiating table, reflect that in the manner in which you communicate and engage with essential workers. So are we only going to say it was the workers in this respect, or perhaps there was poor communication all round when we're talking about high inflation? Do they not need perhaps to also get some sort of an increase?
In fact, I think it's a failure by all of us all round. Let's look at government. Here's a government that's not simply enforcing the laws that already exist of national key point and being an essential service and say, but it's wrong, you can't go on strike. There must be other ways in which we can have a conversation. But remember, this is a government that itself stands as accused number 1 as per the current sitting president. This government that allowed its former past president to survive no less than 8 motions of no confidence, and by only saying we are going to put the party before the country, even though the president had put his right hand on the Bible and saying, I pledge allegiance to the Constitution as the supreme law of the country, to uphold, respect, and protect the laws of this country. Even the current president, He doesn't need the 4 commissions that were running concurrently, simultaneously, and in parallel. One in SARS, the other one, the Zondo Commission, the other one on the fitness of Lawrence Mukhwebi's fitness to hold office, amongst others. All they had to do was just to enforce the current laws, and the current laws are not being enforced. Let me end, Mfundo, by saying at the moment, the province of KwaZulu-Natal is actually being wrecked, being destroyed. This is the second biggest economy in the country at 16%, Gauteng 30% GDP, Western Cape 14%. Because of the lawlessness of Amadela Ngogubona for the past 3 years, before the 2 weeks in July of a failed insurrection and rampant looting, where people, marauding gangs with automatic weapons, where no private citizen is allowed to carry AK-47s or R5 rifles, they go to construction companies, state-owned enterprises, and saying we demand equity for free or hire people from our faction. They shot in absolute daylight a general manager at Richards Bay Mineral, and up until now, there's absolutely no consequences. I think it's all of these things coming together that says actually crime pays in South Africa.
But is it not perhaps, or is there no need for a multi-pronged approach here? That yes, you enforce the law, but clearly something needs to happen with the leadership, governance itself. Because insofar as KZN is concerned, when we had the truck protesters, I know Busa was among those that was very concerned about what was happening on the N3. But now, weeks later, we have the Minister, Thulas Nxesi, and coming out to say, you know what, in fact, it is not a scarce skill to have people driving trucks, something that the truck drivers had actually known all along. But it's only now that you see the leadership actually coming and stating categorically that we will penalize the employers who continue to employ outside of our borders just to exploit these people. So at that point, does it not say perhaps we do need a multi-pronged approach that enforce the law, but make sure that the enforcers of the law are in fact competent themselves? Because there needs to be a trust element.
Mfundo, you are absolutely correct. So the Department of Home Affairs, by their own admission, they are saying in 2020, they had 600,000 cloned South African IDs. The following year, in 2021, that number jumps to 5.6 million. So we have, by Department of Home Affairs' own admission, 6 million people walking around with duplicate South African licenses. It is these people that are illegal immigrants that are not being hired by the transport industry and the trucking industry, where the South Africans themselves are rendered unemployed, where we now hold the world record for all the wrong reasons. Highest unemployment rate in the world at 46.6%, highest youth unemployment rate in the world at 74.9%, highest small and medium enterprise failure rate in the world, and where even femicide, when men kill women, not by a factor of 2, but 5 times more the global average, the second only to Russia in terms of suicide rate. So it tells you that we are really in a spot of border, the most unequal society in the world at a Gini coefficient of 0.6. We took over from Brazil in 2010. So, of course, we need a multi-pronged strategy by all the 4 social partners, by labor, by government, by business, but also by civil society. But remember, when you read the Zondo Commission, even business itself is not spared. Then Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo had some choice words about some of the business conducts that have actually aided and abetted state capture. And he goes on to call them by name. So I think what is needed when one looks at business is a serious intervention to steer business back to its true north. Because we cannot speak of a just society when business is seen to be at the apex of injustice. What is needed today is incisive, bold leadership, which only business itself can provide. In fact, I'll go as far as saying, if we are going to get ourselves out of this hole, because the last survey that we did says business is trusted twice as much as government, what then are we going to do as business to come up to meet this trust that has been thrust upon us, so that we do certain things without even asking for government's permission? For instance, business does not need government's permission to pay small and medium enterprises in 30 days. Business does not need government's permission to address issues of gender equality and pay parity, where in the 21st century, we are paying women 75% of what we pay men for work of equal value. I think business need to say, we will make this country successful.
No, Mr. Mohale, I think it's understandable why you are the president. Really, you are looking to ensure that business is at the forefront of changing this country. Thank you very much for your time. That was Business Unity South Africa's President Bonang Mohale.